I got the Edelkrone motion module 2 days ago and I wanted to do a quick review, but unfortunately I'm sick, can't go outside, so I'm going to instead do this video where I answer some of the questions I had when I ordered the motion module with the Edelkrone SliderONE. So, most important question, does it make sense? And I think it definitely makes sense for some people. A piece of equipment makes sense if it does something and there's nothing else that does the same thing for a cheaper price. For travel, this is probably it's an amazing slider because it's so small and you can get those amazing time lapses with movement, which are really cool. For product shots, you can make very smooth, very short, slow movement, which is very nice. And this might actually make sense also for some interview people, especially if you have a light run and gun setup, because you can just, it's small enough so you can just leave it on top of the tripod all the time. It's also relatively cheap. That's why it makes sense. Most of the sliders with motion control start from €1,000. At 530, I think, it's more expensive than I would like it to be, but it is still cheaper than getting a full-size slider with motion control. And best of all, it's very small, very easy to pack, and it's relatively light, so you can have it, if you have a light setup, this is probably the one you want to go for. Yeah, so it definitely does make sense, but also be kind of critical, is this the slider for you? For beginners, it's great if you want to do very smooth, short slides, but the problem is, since it's so short, you have to plan the slide very carefully. For pros, well, if you need this type of a slider, you know what you want, and just get it. It's definitely worth the money. It's super sturdy, maybe even too sturdy. It's kind of heavier than I think it could be if they removed some of the aluminium, replace it with plastics. And it's for pros, there's a little gripe. I wish you could change the battery, but Canon LPE6 is fine. The apps, I tested both iOS and Android apps and they both work. There's some bugs, but all the features work. So that's great. Most times when you get the first app, it's terrible, but this time all the feature works. It has some trouble if you go all the way to the extreme. So if you go all the way to 0 or 17 or 16, for some reason it's 17 on Android, 16 centimeters on iOS, I don't know why. If you go all the way to the end, it might get stuck, which is really weird. So you can avoid this easily by adding 1 to 5 millimeters from the end. The really nice thing about this motion module is that it works completely without the phone after you set it up. So after you put in the settings and you start the slide, you can just shut down your phone. You don't need the application at all. It will be completely self-contained until it either finishes the slide or it runs out of battery. So I think that's very well thought from Edelkrone. So you can do those one-day time lapses without your phone battery running out. Next question, is it sturdy? Yes, it is extremely sturdy. It's probably the sturdiest slider I've ever tried because it's short. It emphasizes the fact that it's fully made from aluminium. I think it can handle pretty heavy rigs with a heavy head. Now, my question is, can it work with the Sony a6300 and the B3 Live head? I can also move it tilted, and I've tried 20-30 degrees with no problem. Don't know how large of a setup it can move tilted. That I cannot unfortunately test. At least right now, but if you want me to test this, just leave a comment and I will borrow somebody else's bigger rig. Next question. Noise. Now this is very important, and especially if you're doing interviews, the noise makes a huge difference. I would say the noise is very acceptable. I'm going to move the microphone a bit closer. Okay, so now it should be around the same distance from my mouth to the microphone to the slider, so you can kind of compare the noise level. At 100%, I think it is too noisy, you can hear it. So at 100%, it is a bit too noisy in my opinion. However, if you drop it down to 40%, it gets very manageable. And after 30%, it's almost completely silent. The nice thing is that the 40 and 30% are actually more usable slides than using it at 100% speed. So at 40%, it's around 16 seconds without ramping, and 30% is around 21. So those are very nice length for a slide. Probably something more likely I would use in an interview than the couple of seconds that you get at 100% speed. So it is silent enough to be used in interviews or church, whatever discrete situation you might have, but not at full speed. So my overall first impressions, I've done a couple of test slides and the movement is very smooth. I've shown a couple of test videos in this video and it definitely makes sense. So it's a good product. It's great that Edelkrone made it. There are a couple of problems and I'm going to talk about my biggest problem first. When you have the motion unit attached, you cannot do any kind of manual control. So you have to choose between having the SliderONE usable manually or using the motion module. Now, of course, you can take it off, but to put it in, you have to remove the lock mechanism from this end. And that means it's kind of difficult to use it, leave it on top of the tripod without the motion module because it will move on itself, so you cannot use the tripod on anything else. The price, again, I think they could have saved a little bit on the body of the motion module, has had more like a structure to it and then the covering made from plastic. But Edelkrone is known for totally over-engineering their products. And I gotta appreciate it. It's super sturdy. It's maybe too sturdy, but it is definitely really, really sturdy. All the details are very well thought. All the features work. I tested the time-lapse on the Sony, works great. And yeah, overall, I'm very happy so far, looking forward to testing this. So leave in the comments any questions you have. I'll try to answer the best I can. If you have something you want me to test specifically for the real review, you can also leave a comment about that. I hope this has been helpful and see you in the next video.